What's up, y'all? Almost Plumber here. I wanted to do a little bit of a tier list today. For reference, I'm about 55 hours in. I am deep in Act 3. I've been dragging my feet a little bit, trying to do some breeding stuff, and playing a little bit of hard mode, which is very brutal. Regardless, though, I would say that I have had a good chance to try out all the classes so far, some more than others, obviously. And I'm going to go through them in rough order of unlock to kind of talk about them. Now, firstly, the fighter. Now, a lot of people are putting fighter S tier. I would put them S tier if I was rating them the way that other people do. But in my opinion, I think S tier should be, especially for a set of 12 classes, should be 1, maybe 2. Okay. I do think fighter is extremely good. I think it is a little bit worse later on, so I still probably wouldn't put it S tier. But I disagree with having 3 or 4 classes in S tier out of 12. Okay. I think it should only be the best of the best. However, I do think fighter is A tier. Extremely high damage. Plus the speed is extremely beneficial. That's brought so many cats that would have been like maybe a C tier cat into like A tier territory. I think I would put tank B tier. The constitution is extremely good, obviously. -2 intelligence isn't a huge deal. Like most of their spells are priced pretty appropriately. I will say, however, sometimes I feel that the rock abilities and dirt based things are kind of lackluster, and it's kind of hard to get a build rolling off one of those. Now, that's many different classes kind of have that issue, but where they have like 1 or 2 archetypes that aren't great. Mage. Now, Mage, I'm almost tempted to put it B tier, but I do think it is C tier. I play with Mage a lot, so I feel like I do maybe get better results than the average person just because I'm used to the downfalls of it, or the pitfalls. But like, man, I don't know. The Mage, it just feels so weak sometimes, and when you get an elemental synergy or like a mana feeding synergy going where you can like spread your mana to other people, it feels extremely strong. But I don't know. Also, a lot of times your passives and actives just don't line up in terms of like elemental affinity. I will say though, yeah, I think it's top of C tier. I think it's pretty close to B tier. I don't think it's that bad. I just think it's maybe like the most average of the classes. Ranger, Hunter, whatever. I think it's A tier. I think it's probably above Fighter. I don't think it's S tier. A lot of people put it S tier. I don't know. I think that the minion stuff can be pretty strong. It isn't most of the time. Having a consistent range attacker is great, but there's plenty of times where it doesn't, And I'll say this too, the lobbed range attack going over terrain, that's a major thing that holds Mage back as well, is that they need line of sight for their attack. That being said, Ranger it incredibly consistent. I just don't think it's as good as many would say. Cleric, I would put in A tier as well, I think. Actually, no, I think Cleric is maybe just a little bit overrated because of the lack of healing in many classes. It feels very good to have one on your team, but it's hard to not just sacrifice your best cat to become a cleric just for the sake of utility. Because the fact that they get a minus to movement means that you really need a ranged healing spell if that's what you're trying to do. It just feels like for a class where you kind of have to all in on utility, and you also need a strength score for healing with their attack. So it's I don't know. And their offensive options feel lacking most of the time. So I would say I think Cleric is a little bit overrated just because of the lack of other classes healing, but it is still good. It's still plenty good. I would say B is the place for it to go because I feel like You're not getting many pop-off games. It's just very consistent value. And I think that that's the same thing as the tank. I think the fighter and the ranger's hunter are both also consistent, but also have a higher top end. Thief is a hard one. I think Thief might be low B tier, but I think I would put it C tier. No. Yeah, I think I would put it C tier. The only reason is, okay, obviously low health pool class. It has a ranged attack, but half of the class incentivizes you to get behind enemies, which is often going to put you basically in melee territory. Now, it does have amazing mobility. Obviously, it has several teleports, several, kickoffs, etc., plus to movement, and it's also crit reliant. So, if you don't get any way to guaranteed crit, which is often the only way that you're going to be killing a significant unit in the first turn, like something over 5 HP to start, is going to be a crit. So, and that kind of feels like what you should be doing most of the time. I will say, obviously, they do have some like coin based utility, but that's kind of like a meta utility. Like, it doesn't really help in the fight most of the time. Obviously, the stuff like Greed Step or being able to move on reloading your move on picking up a coin can be extremely useful in a fight, but you're sacrificing other things. There's an opportunity cost for it, right? So I don't know. I still think Thief is okay though. Necromancer. Necromancer I'm kind of iffy on. It's probably in B tier. Okay, they're pretty consistent and they have a very high top end with like leech stacking, right? But the consistency is in spite of getting poor builds. Because half the time what you're going to get is you're only going to get a mix of offerings of things that like require you to be downed or require you to be already have other summoning tools or something. It feels like a lot of times you're getting support for things that you don't need, or you have to preemptively take support and hope that support for an archetype and then hope that you get more later. There are skills that are, of course, good in and of themselves, like the leech stacking passives and reanimate and stuff like that. Obviously, very good. Um, but there's also dud passives like getting the zombies at the end of every round on as a starting passive on your Necromancer. It's anti synergy with half of what Necromancer has, and also can instantly kill your units that go down. So, like, I don't know. Necromancer definitely takes a little bit more skill to pilot with, like, the corpse builds and stuff, but still pretty consistent. Tinkerer, I think, is probably, like, just above Necromancer. I will say I haven't played with them too much. They do get good damage. It's kind of inconsistent. Like, your range is weird because of random weapons. Generating tech isn't super easy. There's multiple self damage abilities. Now, I will say they also do have some good self sustain abilities, but they are a class with no HP bonuses that has a lot of self damage. That is not great, like, but they do a good amount of damage and they do have a good amount of mobility. So who's to say? I could definitely see someone rating Tinker higher than me. Druid. Druid is my S tier. I think that Druid is, in my mind, easily the best class in the game. You have two bodies, right? You have you and you have your crow. Your crow is essentially a free health pool. And, this being a game that's based around magic, in Edmund's words, like, health is a resource. And you can spend this resource without fear of injury, which is, basically your permanent consequence punishment, other than if your whole party gets wiped for going down. There's no punishment for a crow going down unless you misplay and you don't have you don't make it worth it, right? So essentially you have the equivalent, like what makes a thief good, being able to dive into the backline as just one half of your class. Also, it inherits stats from you. So if you do have a very good cat, like for example, a cleric, like I was talking about before, wants to eat a good stats cat so that it can be the best support that it can in a way that like you don't really need with like a ranger, for example, who is basically like, do you have 7 dexterity? Yes. Okay, here you go. Here's your ranger. Like you do want other stats higher, but you don't like need it. Whereas this feels like it needs a little bit more support sometimes. With the druid, it's just like everything is just cake. Any extra stat that you have outside of like casting stats or constitution, just a bonus for your bird basically, unless you're also running a shapeshifting build. But the shapeshifting also gives you the stat bonuses, so it can compensate for your lack of those stats. I feel like there's no area where this class is weak. The butcher is very fun. I like it thematically. I've had builds where it does a ton of damage. But -2 to movement. Not good. Hate it. -2 to movement is rough. And, of course, the thing that's supposed to make up for that is the hook. But it's so hard to set up for the hook. And to play around the hook, you're just gimping the rest of your team half the time. Like, especially if you have other melee units. I will say, if you're running a butcher as a sole melee unit, I think that they are actually better than tank or fighter. Because I will say, fighter, one thing is generally speaking, you don't want them as the sole melee unit, which is what kind of makes them weaker later on into the game, in my mind. Regardless, though, I think that having a -2 to movement is pretty rough, and you really that is really eating into your stats. Like from a baseline, that's a maximum of 5 movement on a melee class. Not great. Monk, you know what? Actually, I think just because of how tanky they are, I think they could be C tier. I think that's fine. Monk is hard. Because if you're looking at, especially as you're leveling up, because I'm not in like the super end game yet, right? So it's hard to say. I think I've had a couple monk builds where like they had some crazy mana efficient abilities, and some like crazy stacking over the fight. Like I could see in like very high difficulty encounters, if you have a good stat cat with some items, I could see monk being like maybe the strongest cat possible in a lot of these fights. But for campaign progression, basically, I feel like you're heavily gambling with like basically sending your best stat cat as the monk because it feels like it wants so many stats at once. And it doesn't really have support elements. Like, here's the thing: if you send in a fighter instead of a monk, you're just gonna get better results, no doubt. Now, do I think it's D tier? I don't know. I would say right now, I would say that it's D tier. It's hard to not call Butcher D tier if you put him D tier. I would say they both go in C. I would say the Butcher is definitely better, but I don't think Monk is D tier. I do think they are maybe the most stat reliant cats in the game, for a pop off. On the other hand, for our last one, Psychic, I think they are A tier. I don't know other people's opinions on this, but Psychic feels like the most control mage esque character. Well, I mean, it just does to me, but I don't know how other people feel about how useful that is in terms of like moving things around the battlefield. But I have gotten great results with it. Being able to pull and push units, so like you can create so many zoning opportunities, and you can essentially play to your teammates' range and force them into like the perfect position for them. And they don't slack on damage, and they have things like being able to give other units backflip. Like they have a lot of supporting capabilities and a good amount of ways to get damage up as well. Like even an ability like ping, where like you get a 1 damage missile that's just line of sight. Anytime that you spend mana, like if you get a 2-3 mana thing, like this is I think it's a +4 intelligence class or something. It goes crazy. But yeah, I think that the game. I didn't put anything in D tier because I do feel like the game is relatively well balanced given the insane amount of stuff in the game, you know? But like I said before, I don't believe in having, 4 things in S tier. So I feel like, and I do feel like Druid is a step above most of the other classes. I'm mostly rating things on consistency, but it's kind of, that consistency versus top end dilemma of like, can I expect this to perform well for me on any given run? And does it have the potential to leap up? Like any of these classes could absolutely leap up to like be instantly better than a druid on a run. But if I take a druid on the run, they are the most consistent cat, period, in my mind. And they have high end. So that's basically how I see it. Anyway, let me know what y'all think. Have a good one.